There we go.
There we go. How's it going?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm just gonna take a
Yeah.
sec to get my recording started here. Well, so if you hear my cat, apologies. It's her house, and we just live here. So,
Yeah, I know how that is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're ready, I'll kick us off.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Legacy is a new game that I'm really excited about. Ever since I was bit by the fantasy extraction bug, I've been looking for more titles to play, and I think this game really stands out in terms of its vision, its world, and its combat mechanics. Legacy is being crafted from the ground up by a new independent studio called Notorious, and we are super lucky to be joined by Chris Kaleiki, its founder and CEO. So, Chris, thanks for your time. Welcome in.
Yeah, hi. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Well, first, let me say, congrats on the recent Legacy playtests. So far, they've been super, super fun, and it must feel really great to have lots of different people finally playing the game.
Oh, yeah, I mean 100%. I think one of my favorite things as a developer is really seeing players play the stuff that we create. And so,
Hmm.
for a while, right, and it's just I think every new game has this experience. You're just kind of working on it internally and you have some
Hmm.
assumptions of how it will land or how it will do, but you really don't know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's really great to now have players playing the game and seeing them progress and try out all the stuff you've been designing for a couple years. And yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
really
Awesome.
it's the best part of being a dev, I think.
Sure. And the next free demo runs from December the 4th to the 10th. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's going to be a week. So it starts on the 4th, which is this Wednesday, and goes till I think the 10th or 11th.
Awesome.
Yeah, 11th, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah. We've been
Exciting.
doing these. We've had what? Gosh, this will be the fourth. So we've had
Hmm.
three of these alpha play tests that we've done since the Steam Next Fest, and they all last around a week. So that's right.
Awesome. So, for the conversation today, I want to talk about the world in Legacy, the combat, and your vision for the early access period. But before that, let's get some background on you in the studio. I know you yourself had a position on the World of Warcraft team for many years, working on different aspects of the game. Could you give us a quick recap of your time and role at WoW?
Yes, there's like the short and there's a long story, but
Sure.
I'll give you kind of the short version. Uh, yeah, I mean, I was a gamer for my entire life. It was something that I really did to connect with my family and with my dad and all these sort of things. And I played a lot of Blizzard games. And long story short,
Hmm.
I played a lot of WoW and talked with the developers there, and then ended up getting an entry level job there. And so I was there for around 14 years or so.
Whoa.
All worked on World of Warcraft the entire time, which is my all-time favorite game,
Yeah.
and IP as well. And I worked, yeah,
Hmm.
as a designer, so I touched pretty much a lot of that game, whether it came to some stuff on maybe like on the UI or quests or zones or spawning or that
Hmm.
sort of thing, but mainly worked on combat and class design.
Hmm.
Class design is probably my biggest passion.
Hmm.
And so
Awesome. I mean, it kind of
and
sounds
then
like a
as I
dream job, to be honest, right?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like what I was talking about, you can kind of imagine your favorite game, but then you're able to change some of the rules, and then the next week, kind of see or couple months, see how
Hmm.
players take receive that,
Hmm.
those changes, and
Hmm.
see them live and play test it yourself. Like you have the power and ability
Hmm.
to make
At
it better.
scale as well, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like thousands of people. Cool. I mean, a lot of my work here in Toronto gives me a lot of exposure to tech startups, to young companies. So I'm very aware of the risks and the hard work required for that kind of work. What was your motivation to start Notorious? Because I don't imagine it was a decision you made lightly.
No, I mean, there's another long short story there too. But
Sure.
when I left Blizzard, I made a video why I left,
Okay.
and it's a few years old. It's on YouTube. Aswin reacted to it. But basically, the reason why I left was I just felt like um, AAA and that studio was changing, and the
Mm-hmm.
culture of making games was changing, and
Mm-hmm.
I really miss the old way that we used to do things, and I also kind of miss the old version of WoW, and WoW Classic reminded me of,
Mm-hmm.
and I just really was trying to push internally of like. I want to change WoW kind of back to, or some of the old philosophies and fundamentals that we wanted, that we had in the past. But I had the realization that it won't change. I changed,
Mm-hmm.
This company changed, and that's just how it's
Sure.
gonna happen, and I can't do anything about that. And so that's what really motivated me to start my own studio, get people who shared my sort of vision of what I want to do, and like create a place where we work kind of like I said, kind of the old ways that Blizzard sort of works.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my main motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And the game we're making, Legacy Still in Sorcery,
Mm-hmm.
really really has to do with a lot of the passions that I have, that the team has, the founding team has,
Mm-hmm.
which is like PvP, fantasy, combat, class design, really great class design, progression, all these sort of things, crafting. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it.
Awesome. How many people in the studio currently?
Yeah, so full-time employees, another long topic, but the way that game studios and game development works today is it's a mix between, you have like full-time employees, like the core, and then you also have contractors, and you have
Sure.
outsourcers or whatever.
Yeah.
But full-time employees, we have around less, like 25 or so. But then we have like some contractors who work with us, and so that's around like another 10 or so. So like
Awesome.
around 30,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, mid
Quaint,
30s.
controllable, navigable. That's cool.
Oh yeah, that's another long conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Focusing on legacy again. To me, it really feels like the world itself takes center stage. Like there's a seamless transition between different environments. There's a sense of freedom. There's a sense of danger too. Can you talk about the motivation for building this kind of map and the kinds of interactions you think it allows?
Yeah, I often talk about the vision of the game as being really world PvP,
Mm-hmm.
and world PvP has been part of games for a long time. It kind of started in Ultima Online,
Mm-hmm.
where you basically roamed the world gathering things. Then if you died, people could fully loot you, and you lost all your stuff, that sort of thing, which
Mm-hmm.
created like this interesting kind of stickiness culture in that game. They had like good cop, bad cop, kind of like you get red flagged, all these things.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went dormant for a long time, and other usually in MMOs you wouldn't do that type of full loot experience because it's kind of hardcore, and
Uh-huh.
you have a mixture of a bunch of audiences in MMOs. Certainly in WoW we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of fell out the wayside, but then it started coming back with games like PUBG or Battle Royales or Fortnite. If you die, you lose your things, you die permanently, you're out.
Mm-hmm.
And other people can loot you. And then Tarkov and these games like this. But what's interesting is a lot of them are like FPS games. Not a lot of them are RPG. And so it's like
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to make a world PvP game. It's another one of my passions. What I
Mm-hmm.
loved about WoW,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always been that was this like little small system in like a way larger game. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, why don't you just make a whole game around this concept? And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what Legacy is. Now I think there's this whole subgenre called extraction. When we pitched the studio and pitched the game to like investors, or I pitched it to influencers, my friends, extraction wasn't really a word you used.
Mm-hmm.
It was a system that say Tarkov had, which came from gosh, what's that Ubisoft game, The Division, and came from a bunch of other games. But now it's kind of like its own little subgenre that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like um, battle royales in a bit, but that was never really kind of the intent to do like, oh, let's do a fantasy Tarkov necessarily. It was more about like world PvP and that sort of experience.
Mm-hmm. Do you think world PvP is compelling because it mimics a kind of danger or possibility that exists like in the wilderness, like at a higher level? Like, does it feel more adventurous when like almost anything goes?
Yeah, yes. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with the system design and the experience. I think the most important thing in games and as a game designers is creating an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think battle royales were really popular, is because every match was different. There's always
Mm-hmm.
a story that came out of it, like, oh, I got so close to the circle, but then someone ran me over, and then all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And which is very different than games like that I grew up with, which were more, you just followed the guidebook and you did what the designer wanted to go A,
Mm-hmm.
B, C, D,
Mm-hmm.
and really, I think in extraction and this sort of genre, yeah, players can. There's all these player stories that emerge, and the mood and experience you want the player to have is a sense of danger. Usually I think one thing people get wrong in this genre, or it's still evolving and it's hard to define, but PvE is really important. And a lot of times,
Mhm.
players will die to creatures, or not necessarily. It's not really a PvP sort of game, but really, I mean, it is a big part of it. But the thought that you could die, or there are other players in the map, that feeling creates this anxiety and this thrill.
Mhm.
It's kind of like if you go camping, oh, is there going to be a bear or something like that? I always use this example, but you're never really going to see a bear. But the thinking about it
Yes,
makes it more interesting. It makes
totally.
it more exciting. You have like your day pack with all these bugs, bear spray or something like that. It creates this fantasy, this immersion, this sense of danger, which
Yes.
heightens the experience, right?
Yes, totally agree. I've noticed the map in Legacy is full of different houses, basements, crypts, castle rooms, lots of different, sometimes creepy internal spaces that really feel different than the open map itself. These spaces
Mhm.
don't seem totally fleshed out in the demo, but what do you imagine their role will be as the game gets further along in development?
Yeah, good question. So the Greenwood is what we call it, like this first map that we put
Yes,
in there, features all these castles and these ruins and these sort of things.
they're awesome.
And there's those areas which are, you know, castles that have multiple levels, but there's also these internal underground little crypt areas.
Hmm.
And so really the point of them is really to shake up the experience in the map, so it's not just all surface level and there's like this down into underground areas,
Hmm.
just so that's a different mood or vibe. But also it has different loot, like these.
Mm.
So something we've been noticing on maybe noticing in all the alpha tests is we're starting to kind of shift where the loot is and make different experiences, make it so that if you want a certain
If you
item,
need glow moss, you got to go subterranean kind of thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so we're going to do this even more.
Hmm.
Something we've been talking about is making a lot of the crypts just have a lot of disease. Like there's be like little corpses you have to avoid on the
Mm.
ground that could
Hmm.
disease you, and there's this disease buildup mechanic. But there's also like cooking that you could do to make you resistance to disease, or
Hmm.
potions that cure it and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And so trying to create like different experiences in the map. So the underground areas will probably be a lot of undead, a lot of disease,
Hmm.
and then a lot of you need keys to open up certain um lock boxes and things that are unique down there, like for
Hmm.
example the crypt key, I think in this
It's always
beta.
exciting to find the keys. My goodness. And then I can also
Yeah.
imagine, like, if you're planning for a run, if you're looking for a certain kind of material, or you want to beat a certain kind of mob, and you know that mob is going to be, or that material is going to be in a certain area that has certain debuffs, you prep for the run, like you fill your backpack with all this stuff you're going to need to
Yeah.
to be in that space. That's always cool, and that when you can do that, plan the run. Speaking of the open map, so a lot of other titles have things like world events, have roaming bosses, have day-night cycles, stuff like that. Do you imagine or envision something similar for Legacy down the line?
Yes, yeah, we talk a lot about having so another thing I did at Blizzard was I designed what they call the war mode feature, which is like a world PvP zone feature. And so this had like a bunch of different events that would happen every day or every few hours,
Hmm.
and have roaming world bosses that were PvP oriented and pop up what they called world quests that came up and came down.
Hmm.
So I'm very familiar with doing that kind of content, and it's something that we want to do. There's some complexities in design of like if you have too much of that, then the player just kind of sits around and like waiting for that event, and they're like everything's boring. And so you have to make sure you have to thread this needle of like the highs
Hmm.
and lows or whatever with
Hmm.
it. You know what I mean? But it is something we want to do. We don't really have all the foundational tech built out yet. It's something we're working towards.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, there is this one area in the map. I think it's the southeast, called Morkthog's Lair.
Hmm.
And so there's going to be, we're going to try to do is this world boss in there that you really need good gear to fight him.
Hmm.
And he's kind of a more of a scripted encounter.
Hmm.
What you would find in like a boss in like a ARPG or
Sure.
Elden Ring or something
Sure.
like that. And that'll be another thing we're going to experiment with, because usually in MMOs or RPGs, like you go into an instance, it's just you with the boss or whatever. It's very
Mm.
clean. But in our game, we're trying to play with like, he'll make a loud sound to the whole zone. People know that boss is being fought
Uh,
and have the option to come, kill you, or maybe they help you.
hmm.
Like, I don't know,
Totally.
so it creates all these other dynamics and things like that too.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Let's talk about combat, because if there's one other aspect of this game that I'm totally in love with, it's this. Legacy, to me, feels like a really interesting blend of ARPG abilities and fighting game mechanics with a Souls-like evade in the mix as well. The last 2 years of PvP gaming for me have been centered around Dark and Darker, Chivalry 2, and compared to those games, Legacy feels very dynamic. Can you talk about your various inspirations for the combat system and what kinds of experiences you hope it enables?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm really happy to hear that you like it. It is
Yes,
something that we spent a lot of time on.
it
If there's
shows.
one thing we spent a lot of effort on at the studio was combat,
Yeah,
and it's
awesome.
really, by the way, super hard to do, and I
I
think it's like
bet.
a make or break thing.
Yeah.
Like even take that recent game that's everyone's talking about, Avowed. It's a AAA studio, probably 200 million budget or something like that. And even they, when they released their trailer or something like that, everyone's just like, oh, the combat doesn't feel good. It seems clunky. It seems all
Mm-hmm.
these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, no matter what your budget, it's really hard to do combat. And so, yeah, we spent a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time on it. The vision was really, hey, let's take this action-based combat model, which you're seeing more and more now, which is like, say, Dark Souls or Breath of the Wild or God of War, these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, rooted from fighting game fundamentals. Actually, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the combat designers who built those combat systems came from designing fighting games.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so take that foundation, but then add spells and abilities to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was, again, one of my passions at Blizzard was doing. I designed a lot of spells and abilities
Awesome.
for that game, and
Mm-hmm.
so adding those two things and then kind of seeing how it goes. There's some things that we played around with a lot when we developed the combat system. One was, how much should it be weapon based versus spells? In the
Mm-hmm.
very beginning, it was mostly weapon normals, and then spells played a very lower role.
Mm-hmm.
But then the team, everyone just didn't like that. They wanted the spells to be more forefront, and
Mm-hmm.
just didn't like having just weapon attacks. Because if you do play Dark Souls, right, most of it is it's just pretty much all normals of the weapons,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is cool. But then for whatever reason in our game, everyone's just like, that's not enough. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
which is fine, and we were trying to find that right balance. And so that was really the vision. And I also think, a lot of the foundational stuff we're doing with this combat system, I think is the best. If I were making an RPG today, even an MMO, it would be basically what I would do. And I think this is kind of what the future is. And it gives designers a lot more hooks and the abilities to
Sure. Yeah.
really tell the story of the fantasy of what it is to be a warrior or mage.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about something like dodge and parry, these things like this, they came from Dungeons and Dragons, which was like you roll a dice, or like
Mm-hmm.
you have this pen and paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got like MMOs where it was a damage calculator, which the game in the background rolls a
Just
dice,
simulates
and then
rolling a
tells
dice.
you it
Yes.
simulates rolling a dice.
Yeah.
And then you start getting to like something like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, where now dodge is literally a button you press.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like something rolled behind the scenes. So over and over, as game designers, we've been trying to elevate the immersion and the reality of what we want to do with fully realize this vision of making you feel like a warrior or hunter or these things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely think you're on the right track. It feels really good to play. I think that's the reason I've been so motivated to like really focus on this game, like really like let this game into my life and have it kind of take over whenever there's a playtest. So keep up the good work there.
Yeah.
I've heard you describe
Yeah.
the combat triangle of attacking, blocking, evading. You've also mentioned a desire for Legacy to elevate or to prioritize melee combat. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing that. I hope I'm not too bad. But
Yeah.
the reason is because you think it's an ideal showcase of the game's combat features. Is there anything you can speak more on from that perspective?
Yeah. So when it comes to melee, so one of the challenges with this game is, or any game that's RPG like this, is that you have melee and you have range, and
Mm-hmm.
it's super hard to balance the two. To play melee usually is the harder
Yes.
thing to play
Yeah.
than ranged, and so you got to like think a lot about that, like
Mm-hmm.
um because the melee play more of the combat system. They have to evade attacks. They have to read the opponent.
They
They have
take
to
more
work the
risk.
animations, take more risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to make that rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if I'm gonna like interact with the combat system more, you talk about the combat triangle, then it should be rewarding. So that is
Mm-hmm.
really important. It's something I don't think we're like quite there yet. I don't think it's that bad. We have all the knobs and the tuning available to make it excellent. It's
Mm-hmm.
just we just standing up a lot of stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when we think about the combat triangle, fighting games, they all have this combat triangle, which is basically like, you know, you have an attack, which has the wind up, and then the follow through frames to it, the active and follow through frames, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the follow through has a recovery where you're kind of like what players would call stunned or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and another player can counter you. So you could dodge that, and you could follow up before they're through the recovery. There's a lot of like hit frame stuff that has to go into that, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have like block or you have parry that counters that. So you have this triangle of like attack and then block, and then the third one is usually throw where you can counter the block. So
Mm-hmm.
they all kind of like counter each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we built this. We don't have like throws in our game, like literal throws,
Mm-hmm.
like or yet. Maybe we will in the future. I don't know. It's a whole other thing to add to
Yeah,
the
right.
system, but we do have a way to counter when players are blocking. So when they're blocking, you can the warrior
Heavy
can
attack.
block break you,
Uh-huh.
and this is this red attack
Uh-huh.
I think on the press and hold on the axe you
Mm-hmm.
could block break. There's a
Mobs can
few
do
that
it
counter
too, right?
that.
The
And
PvE can
mobs
do
can
it.
do it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So that is the current combat triangle
Mm-hmm.
right now in the game, and it's something we're actively working on. It was more of a thing very early in development, but that we felt it became too. It was a little too rote, I think. Just like,
Mm.
oh, I'm just gonna press this. Now when I see that, it's
Mm.
there's an art to it, but
Mm-hmm.
we kind of diminished it, but we're kind of bringing it back now. The third warrior weapon that we call it the wrecking ball right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's we're gonna ship this like early next year or later this year. And this one has a lot to do with like red attacks. So there's a lot of red attacks on it.
I see.
So yeah.
Look out.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's actually a good segue because I see on the roadmap the priest is going to get a sword and shield, like a sword and buckler,
Yes.
which fans of my channel will know I'm very excited about. Will this priest update by chance be ready for playtest on December the 4th?
Yeah, so we're putting it in this build.
Yes.
So we're playtesting it today. Actually, we had a whole discussion this morning about it because um, it's a little overpowered.
I see.
But yeah, and
Great.
this is one of the classes that I worked a lot on at Blizzard was the priest.
Mm-hmm.
I designed like the modern kind of discipline spec, which was like a shield absorption spec, and
Mm.
something I always wish the priest had was some sort of melee build.
Sure.
And so finally I'm able to kind of do something what I always imagined. And then going back to your other point about like melee in the game,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that all the classes have some sort of melee experience. The only one that doesn't right now is the hunter, although she has a swift bow which has a melee attack to it.
Like a kick and bounce back kind of thing.
She on her right click on the so she doesn't have ADS on the swift bow. It's if you hit the button, it's actually a melee attack. So it's sort of this mid-range, short-range kind of
Hmm.
experience. And so yeah, that's the vision with the sword and
Mm-hmm.
buckler is just to give her a different play style that's very different. Was one request that WoW players would always ask is I want a melee priest or
Mm-hmm.
that'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really the vision with the kit is just that the priest obviously she has a lot of range attacks. She has her spells can be cast at range. So this allows her to bounce between melee and range.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not really about like so she kind of wants to poke you and then like fly away and then hit you from range and come back to melee. So it has a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting tempo to it,
Mm-hmm.
where it feels like you get in melee, then get out, and then get back in, and
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't wait to try it out. That's going to be cool.
yeah, yeah,
I'm also super in love with the rogue's perfect block or a parry mechanic. I think on the twin
right.
swords. Do you guys refer to it as a parry? Is that the official internal vocab?
We do. We call it parry internally.
Okay, parry. But this seems like a unique feature that no other class or weapon can access. Can you talk a bit more about this particular feature? Will other classes or items get a similar parry mechanic in the future?
Yeah, so this one was kind of experimental. We haven't done a lot of parrying. The reason why is because up until you mentioned Dark and Darker, some other melee chivalry,
Mm-hmm.
um, there aren't a lot of good examples of melee PvP online games.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of challenges to doing parry because of network reasons.
Yes.
So It has to get sent to the server. The server has to validate it, and there's all these things. And that's another thing we spend a lot of time on, is making sure the network connectivity and validation and all that sort of thing feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't cheat it, cheat at
Mm-hmm.
it, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. It's really important. And so, but one of the parry feels really fun for the player, but it's such a timing dependent thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you parry something, it doesn't happen, you'll be like, "What the fuck? This is bullshit." Sorry to
No, it's all good. Yeah.
you could bleep that. But and so we didn't want to do too much of it. So we're trying it on the rogue to see how that goes. The rogue is kind of the most technical, kind of hardcore class that we have right now out of the four.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but if you perform it accurately, we do reward you with like I think some follow up.
Mm-hmm. You get a counter attack. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
damage boosted attack.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe if it surprises us and is pretty performant and doesn't have a bunch of issues and things like that, we could pepper it around other
Mm-hmm.
classes or try it elsewhere. But we also kind of like that's a rogue thing,
Sure.
too.
Yeah. I
So
mean, well, however you want to take it. Like, I'm happy to mess around with it. If it's on other classes, if it's on the priest, that'd be awesome. I was shocked to see that it wasn't on. When I discovered the parry on the rogue, I was like, oh, I'm going to play warrior and get to do this thing too. But I realized it's not there because of all the blocking charges. Or it is a different class experience. Let's
right.
I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes. Of course, combat is tied directly to classes in the game, and currently there are 4 classes available, with more on the horizon. Can you talk about the next couple of classes that will be coming to Legacy, and what kind of combat or team comp related roles they might play?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So we do have 2 other classes planned that we're working on right now, which are the wizard and the paladin.
Mm-hmm.
We think those are really core classes that we get teased a lot because it's legacy still sorcery.
You don't have them yet.
Sorcery.
Yeah, exactly.
We have it
Sure,
as the priest, but
sure. One step at a time.
um,
One step at a time.
yeah. So the wizard for sure will scratch that itch of sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the next 2 we have planned. And in terms of group compositions, a very great question. So it's a goal for all the classes to really be the defining, like it should feel like the best wizard you've ever played in an RPG. It should
Mm-hmm.
feel like the best um, priest you've ever played in an RPG. And we're really spending a lot of time on that. And by the way, if players are like, "That's not true, here's why," I would love to know, because I
Mm-hmm.
look at everything and try to play everything.
Mm-hmm.
But so the wizard really will be about. We're trying to do something different with him that the other classes don't have right now, and one will be kind of doing this cross-class interaction. So right now, the warrior can. We haven't really fleshed this out that much, but the warrior can grab and carry boulders and throw them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is kind of really good for opening up on a mob or something like that,
Big
or hitting
damage.
it against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just kind of a big damage event. Well, the wizard could shape ice and make a boulder, and then the warrior can
Oh,
carry that and throw that. For
cool.
example, something we're playing with.
Yeah.
He could probably enchant other players' weapons to do affliction damage, like
Mm-hmm.
fire or frost or
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hunter can also summon a cyclone, right? And maybe he turns it to a fire cyclone.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, trying to make him interact with the other classes' abilities and really make what you talked about, group compositions, was a really important factor in a game like this.
Sure.
Of like, oh wow, like, traditionally in WoW there's this comp that was called RMP, which is Rogue Priest Mage,
Mm.
and all they just synergized together.
Sure.
And it kind of just happened. Like no designer at Blizzard was like, "We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
put this
Just emerged.
together." It just kind of emerged.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, I did spend a lot of my designer time making certain compositions work,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't do that, some just don't have a home, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
hunters, like I don't work with
Mm-hmm.
anybody. So some
And it
designer
adds
really
real
has to,
depth,
like,
right? The depth it adds to the game is just incredible as well.
yeah. So I mean, I don't want to make it to like, oh well, I always have to play with a wizard if I play this game. That's not the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the artistry of game design. It's like
Mm-hmm.
hard to do this, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to make it like it could make sense and it feels like it's a good synergy, but then it's not required.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something we're doing with all the classes, and the wizard will really help breathe life into that vision.
Awesome. How many total classes do you envision being in the game at full release?
Yeah, so when you say full release, we do intend to have the game go into early access. So probably for EA, we'll have the 4 that we have now, like all
Mm-hmm.
polished up and that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. And then shortly after that, we want to release the wizard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the goal for early access. And then we talk about like the full game. That would what I would call Gold Master, like 1.0 of the
Mm-hmm.
game. And for that, I always intended there to be the
The
six, which is
6.
the paladin and the wizard.
Awesome.
So, and then I have like many ideas.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, I'm sure you do. As of right now, what class do you play most often?
Yeah, good question. The team you always made teased me because I would always play the priest, and
Mm-hmm.
the priest is just one of the stronger ones, and so
Mm-hmm.
like, well, Chris is just making his class, the god class or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a fondness for the priest because I have the fondness for the edgier classes, usually the ones that no one really plays, and not a lot of the team plays the priest just because there's a certain fantasy that you have to align with. But
Sure.
I always play healers in every game I play, usually, and so I play the priest a lot. But these days I play the hunter a lot.
Mm.
I don't know why. I just kind of like have a fondness
Yeah.
for the
Cool.
flow of the hunter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk quickly about the roadmap for Legacy heading into early access in 2025? What are your goals for the early access period, and what do you hope to learn from the experience?
Yeah. Sorry, you said the goals for
Because early access is still kind of like a data collecting exercise, right? Like it still is kind of like another step towards full release. So what are you guys hoping to learn from that whole process of going through early access?
Yeah. So early access, right? This is a whole other long topic, but early access is something that I think players have a love-hate relationship with it. I have
Sure.
some friends who are like, I will never play an early access game, because usually they're kind of buggy or
Yeah.
these sort of things.
It's kind of a fact of life these days, though, eh?
Yeah, most games, like even Hades, right, is like in early access right now.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think about early access is that I think it makes most sense for a game like ours, which is going to be this really multiplayer online, kind of competitive PvP game. And it's just hard to nail that if you're just a studio who's working on it for 4 years, don't show it to anybody, then here it is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to get a good result there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even AAA who have unlimited budgets don't nail that, right? Look,
Mm-hmm.
look how many of these games have hotfixes like reduce the damage by 50% the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened there?
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's really important for us to have this early access moment where we get tuning and balance, and we just validate a lot of our assumptions. Our team, I think,
Yeah.
is pretty well seasoned, has a lot of experience. I've done live service games most of my life, my entire career. But even that said, it's not simple, and anyway, that's the goal with with
Mm-hmm.
with EA.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, then, last question. You made it. Congratulations. What would you
Yeah.
say is your definition for success with the game generally? Like, can you describe what you hope Legacy becomes in 3+ years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, it's always hard to I'll speak for myself,
Sure. Yeah.
but I think or don't want to speak for everybody in the team. Everybody has their own definition of success, I
Mm-hmm.
think. But really, for me, I think the success is that the vision's realized. We had this idea for the game, what we wanted it to be like, what the players experience we wanted the players to have. To me, it's been great to see, almost eerie, with seeing how people describe the game and what it's supposed to be and what they like about it. Is being yes, it's exactly what we're trying to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't always happen
Oh,
that
that's
way. A
great.
lot of times we'll
Yeah.
ship a game and go, the players just treat it totally different than what it was intended to be. So that's a success for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another areas of success. The other areas of success is at EA launch the game does well enough so that we can finish the gold master of the game. Today is a very challenging time in the market and all
Mm-hmm.
these sort of things, and so it's very hard to create something new in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even though there are some similarities to some other titles, or it's not reinventing the wheel per se,
Mm-hmm.
but creating a new studio, creating a new game, new IP. Oh my gosh,
It's
so hard.
extra risky,
Yeah,
right? Which is why you
yeah,
see so many sequels and reboots and that kind of thing. So it is commendable. I think that I'm a practitioner in like my daily life, and so another reason I picked up on Legacy is because it did feel like you guys were actually crafting something. You were making it. You weren't just buying assets from a store. Like you had a
right.
vision. You're building the game. You're making the game according to that vision, and I think that's really commendable. And that's another reason why I'm really really into it. So I said I said last question, but there's a surprise question here, and I do have one final
Yeah.
one. It's not about Legacy. It's not about gaming. If you had a whole weekend to shop, prep, and cook some food, what would you make? Like, what would you put in the cooking pot?
Interesting. Yeah, that's funny because now we have cooking in the game. The cooking
Hmm.
pot. I just thought of that. I thought that's where you're going. But yeah. I do love cooking actually.
Oh,
It's like
cool.
one of my hobbies. I haven't got a chance to do it a lot since working on this game.
Sure.
It took over my life.
Hmm.
But the one dish that I really love making is this. So I like Mexican food, I like tacos, and so
Hmm.
there's this recipe for ropa vieja tacos, and so that's like one of my. That's probably what I would make.
Awesome. Spicy?
Yeah, spicy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good. Love it. Love spicy. Awesome.
yeah.
Chris, we can't thank you enough for your time. We know you're very busy. We're all really excited for the future of Legacy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, and I really want to thank all the players' support and giving us the bugs and helping us make this game because it really is an important. The players are a really important part of the development process of any game, and so yeah, really, really love that. Love watching your guys' stream, yours as well,
Awesome.
and watching the YouTube videos, things like that, because it's really cool to see players playing and I learn something every time I watch a stream or a video or
Hmm.
any of these things.
Awesome. Well, tell the team we say keep up the great work, and we'll see you guys in Greenwood.
Absolutely, and happy
Okay.
holidays to
Thanks.
everybody
Happy
as well.
holidays. See ya. Thanks.